If you were a child in Sparta, your life was rough. You're not really the property of your parents. You're the property of the state. You belong to Sparta. And when you turned 7, they felt that if you stayed at home, you'd become soft and weak. So at age 7, that's right, like a second grader, you are taken from your home. And you will undergo for now from 7 until 20 intense military training. The Spartans felt that strength came from pain, being able to endure pain, being able to endure sacrifice. That strength came from having sharp wits and being cunning enough to survive. So these children at age 7 have to provide for their own food. In order to survive, they're expected to steal, to rob, to do whatever they can. There's a story from Spartan folklore of a boy who's going through training who finds a fox, a live fox that he's planning to eat for a meal. He captures it. And a group of Spartan soldiers see him and come and ask him what he has. And rather than showing him what they have and they would take it from him because they're bigger and stronger and he's weaker, he hides the fox in his shirt, where the fox, alive, starts biting and eating the boy's stomach. But the boy won't show a sign of what's happening. Not one flinch, not one tear, not one yelp, until the soldiers leave, and then he could kill the fox and have it for himself. And this story was used to teach Spartan boys of how they should act, that they should endure massive pain in order to successfully survive. They're ritually beaten. They're forced to endure pain. Older children are encouraged to beat and bully younger ones because, once again, weakness they felt was the greatest threat to their existence. And the only way to get rid of weakness was to beat it out of somebody, to teach them that they are greater and can overcome it. At age 20, you would go through a series of vigorous, horrible tests. And if you pass, then you had earned the right to become a citizen. You are now a Spartan. You are now a soldier. Just living in Sparta did not mean that you would be a Spartan. And once that happens, you are given land and slaves. If you failed in your testing, despite all of that you went through in your training, you would never be allowed to be a citizen. You'd never be allowed to own land. You'd never have a voice, be able to serve in the military, and you'd have very little rights. The Spartan family has a definitely unusual dynamic. One, usually you were expected to marry after you became a citizen in your early 20s. You were allowed to, but you were not allowed to live with your family or your wife. You had to maintain living in a military barrack until you were at age 30. So Spartan fathers were really not a major part of their children's life until they entered the military training. And you spent most of your life, even after age 30, training for the military. Your job, your life, is honing yourself into a weapon. So Spartan men and women, for the most part, lead pretty separate lives. And because of this, Spartan women have more rights. They too are able to earn citizenship. They run the households. They're the ones who own property, not the Spartan men. They're able to own multiple properties. They were also expected to go through intense training through their childhood. They weren't left at home to figure out how to care for kids and stuff like that. They had to train because the idea was that only Spartan women can produce strong Spartan soldiers. Even their marriage was a whole ritualized fight and it ended with the husband carrying off the wife after physically defeating her. Crazy stuff. But Spartan women have a lot more freedom than most other Greek women, and really than any other women in much of the ancient world, because they had to keep their city and society running. The other idea was also that because the men were often involved in war and fighting, that if somebody were to attack Sparta, the women would be a line of defense and could serve as soldiers and defend and protect their home. Showing love or affection to your children, to your spouse, anything like that was seen as weakness and discouraged. So, hardcore folks. The Spartan military was one of the most advanced in the world, and one of the reasons for this was their use of a weapon called the phalanx. The phalanx is a military formation where the soldiers would closely pack in and interlock their shields and their spears. And their spears were really long, like 15 feet long. And then they would march forward, the people in the back pushing the people in front of them, the people in front of them pushing the people in front of them, basically producing this giant human battering ram. Anything that was shot at them, they'd be blocking with the shields, and they would basically barrel through anything. And fighting during this time period was basically outlasting your opponents. And by tightly packing in and fighting so closely together and protecting each other, it gave them the ability to do this, to outlast each other, to protect each other, and to outlast their opponents. And like their belief in Spartan society, the phalanx was only as strong as its weakest soldier. So if one soldier failed, it made the entire phalanx a lot less safe and more compromised. So one of the beliefs in the Spartan military was that they were to never surrender. When a Spartan left for war, their mother or their wife, whoever was the most important woman in their life, would say, "Come home carrying your shield or lying on top of it." Basically, come home carrying your shield as a victor, because if they lost, they would have to surrender it, or lying on top of it. You either come home victorious or you come home dead. Don't come back as a loser. Rough. Spartan culture was also really tough for the people who lived in Sparta that were not Spartans. Spartans owned a large amount of slaves, like a ridiculous amount of slaves. By some estimates, their slaves, who were called helots, outnumber the Spartans 7-1. So living with that many slaves, you would think that the slaves would try to revolt. So the Spartans were always in fear of them doing that. And so in order to keep them in control, they rule their slaves with fear, humiliation. They were encouraged children to beat, bully, torture slaves. Slaves were seen as subhuman and were really horribly treated. They had really little interest in trade and little interest with interacting with other societies unless they were trying to conquer them. So they really tried to stay within their own place and not interact too much. And they really looked down on science, on art, philosophy. They saw those things as waste of time. They felt that the main thing that you should be learning how to do is how to fight and make yourself stronger and better at beating your opponents. So they especially looked down at the leisurely Athenians, who spend so much of their free time learning and debating and philosophizing. So, in what ways did the Spartans try to drive weakness from its culture? We described a few different ways. Give me a few examples. And if you had to choose between living in ancient Athens or ancient Sparta, which would you choose? Why? I look forward to reading your answers. Have a fabulous Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.